Good evening, everyone. We're about to get started with our May chapter meeting. Months are running by really quick here. So tonight's presenter is Steve Schweigert. He has been working in conservation in Northern California for 20 years and has a diverse background, including PG&E watershed land conservation with the Stewardship Council, urban parks for San Francisco Parks Alliance, trails and greenways with Rails to Trails Conservancy, restoration with Sacramento Tree Foundation, and acquisition and development work with private infill developer LJ Urban. He's excited to help preserve land around Sacramento with Sacramento Valley Conservancy and is leading an effort to make Sacramento a national park city. Steve likes juggling many projects and shepherding them along to completion. He grew up camping and hiking in the Sierra Nevada and loves to explore off the beaten path in the less popular wilderness areas. He has earned a bachelor's in mechanical engineering from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and is certified as a project management professional. Outside of work, Steve loves to mountain bike, ski, kayak, play tennis, and try new things. And tonight he will be giving us a Sacramento open space checkup. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Leslie. So should I stand in front of it here or?
Yeah, if you would. Hang on.
Well, thank you for introducing me, Leslie. I forgot I put all that stuff in my bio. My goodness. I grew up in Lodi. That's why, some of those places kind of sound familiar. But I'm a big advocate for open space. And so tonight I thought we would do an open space checkup. I've been really passionate about this, and there's some new progress that we're making on open space initiatives in our region. So I wanted to share that with you. And just like every so often, you need to go to the doctor and find out how you're doing. Our open space areas need to be checked in on. And so I'm trying to get this information out to a lot of people so that you're inspired and can join in the effort. If you have questions that pop up as I'm going through the presentation, please let me know, and we'll try and work that in. And I'm hoping to actually get some feedback from the group too, since you're plant experts. I'm not a plant expert. I'm focused kind of on the big picture. The plants need places to be. And so open space areas that are still natural are the best places for many of our native species. And so I thought we'd have a real connection on that. So moving right into it, we're actually in really good company in that Valley Vision has done a lot of polling recently for what makes the Sacramento region livable. And we never hear this in the news. Our elected leaders are never talking about this. But what the polling showed is that the people in our region, the residents, think that our natural areas and the recreational trails and access to those areas is the number one thing that makes this region livable and enjoyable. And so I think that's something that we want to elevate and try and use as a way to increase the protections that we're creating for our natural environment. This was kind of new to me when I found that out a couple of years ago. I went to their Livability Summit, and that's really what inspired me to start trying to get all of the environmental groups and work together to try and protect more open space in our area. So, and you can also feel like, you're in part of a big crowd. I think if you ask everyone, they like open space. So I think that's something that we need to translate back into policy and back into some of the decisions that our elected leaders are making as well. So we kind of chose to focus on that SACOG region that Valley Vision works in. It's our 6-county region that is the metropolitan transportation planning, and kind of along with that, there's a lot of land use planning that goes with that as well. So I'll be talking a lot about the SACOG region, and that's kind of an example of it. It's these 6 counties. Sacramento is definitely at the core, but we extend all the way up into the mountains. And we have a lot of very diverse habitat areas in that 6-county region because of our changes in elevation.
Just wanted to adjust the camera a smidge because all we can see is your neck.
I can't see myself either, so I have no idea what people online are looking at. I did shave this morning, so that helps a little bit. So I think one of the reasons that we've got so many special places in the Sacramento region, we've got a huge diversity of habitat types. That comes largely from the changes in elevation, but there's also soil types and access to being along rivers or other kind of special places that influence the habitats. And an important thing about California is it's one of only 36 biodiversity hotspots all that are worldwide. We have just a huge variety of species that call this place home and are found nowhere else. And so it's very important for us to try and preserve our biodiversity, specifically in this area. We're part of the California Floristic Province, and that helps us to make our case that we need to protect the special places where a lot of these plants and animals live. Once they're gone, a lot of times when people talk about Sacramento, they're like, oh yeah, it's great because we're a couple hours from the Bay Area, we're a couple of hours from Lake Tahoe. Yay, good for us. But I think we need to talk more about what's special about right around here too, because we do have a lot of very incredible things. Maybe they're not Yosemite, but there's a lot of very interesting plants and animals that you can learn about. I mean, you guys are out exploring this region all the time. And these are a few of the special places, and some of them are found only here, especially with our vernal pools. We've got all these overwintering birds on the Pacific Flyway. And the American River Parkway is one of the best urban green spaces in the whole country. So there's a lot of great things here that we want to try and protect as well, not just focusing on the gems of California, but we want to make sure that we've got our share of jewels that are protected in the Sacramento region as well. And the other thing that we want to think about is that protecting these things is critical for our well-being. We have ecosystem services that we're getting from all of these natural systems. It's not just having the biodiversity there. We did have all kinds of discoveries, medicines, and things in the Amazon rainforest that we tout. And we don't even know what the vernal pool tadpole shrimp can give us yet, but we'll see what substances we might be able to discover from that. But just the critical natural spaces is something that we also need to make sure that we're relying more on nature-based solutions to fix a lot of our problems. Instead, over the last decades, a lot of times we try and engineer our way out of things with technology. We build dams to hold water in when we should be making sure that it can infiltrate into the ground better. There's a lot of decisions that we make and invest large sums of money in projects that aren't as effective as just relying on some of the natural benefits that we could if we protected more areas and made sure they were managed for these ecosystem services. So it's very important for our well-being. And so just recently, with the biodiversity and the climate crisis, there's been some movement in policies, both nationwide and at the state level, and actually also worldwide, for an initiative called 30 by 30. And hopefully, has everybody heard of 30 by 30? At least a few people. Usually when I'm talking to an audience, like nobody's heard of it. So I knew this group would be up to speed on 30 by 30. But the whole idea is to protect 30% of our lands, and also we're working on marine protected areas as well by 2030. And the goal for that is for biodiversity protection. It's not just important, though, to have 30%. We need to protect the right 30%, right? And we have a lot of lands here in the Sacramento region that need to be protected also to meet those 30 by 30 goals. So if we look at the state as how we're doing, we're actually making very good progress at the state level. I'm involved in the statewide group called Power in Nature that's a partner with the state on the 30 by 30 initiative. And so we've been pushing policies and doing advocacy meetings with the legislators. And in the last 5 years since the initiative started, we've made great progress and are now above 25%. And they think they're going to be able to make it to 30% of the lands protected by 2030. The coastal waters still has a lot of heavy lifting to do because they haven't made any progress on that to create new marine protected areas since the initiative started. But there has been huge investments, federal investments and state investments that have helped us get there. And you can see on the map there's really large blocks, but you'll notice that a lot of them are way up in the mountains in wilderness areas and also out in the deserts. And if you look at the Sacramento region, you don't see a lot of green there. So I think we've got some work to do to address that. And I was warning when I started learning about 30 by 30, well, I mean, we have a geographic area. We have the Sacramento region, 6 counties. So how much space do we have protected in the Sacramento region? So I did some analysis. There's publicly available data from the California Public Area Protected Areas database, and they track, what lands are being managed for biodiversity. And I calculated it all out. I've got, this is a map I made of our region. The areas that are kind of like brown, they don't count towards 30 by 30 because they're national forests that can be logged, or they're BLM that can be mined. So those don't count, but the green areas do. And we've got about 9% that's protected to those 30 by 30 standards. And so I was kind of disappointed by that initially because I'm like, wow, we only have 9%. How are we going to use that message? 30 by 30 for Sacramento region. Everybody's gonna be like, wow, you have so far to go. There's no way. So thinking about it, I'll talk a little bit more later about maybe some different ways that we're gonna think about what a goal we could have to achieve some real progress in the next few years. And it's probably not gonna be just the 30 by 30 message, but just focusing in on a few of the areas where we do have fairly large blocks of land protected. These are all discrete sections. And starting on the left there, we've got the Coast Range. We've got some new additions that have been made to Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument. And those are very helpful. There's some big blocks there also in brown. And the other thing is that the farmland doesn't count because it's not managed just for biodiversity. It's being managed for food production. So that's one thing that we find agricultural to be very valuable, especially for species like Swainson hawk, but it's not going to count for 30 by 30 at the statewide level. So that's the Coast Range. We also have the second one over there is primarily the Yolo bypass. So we've got huge amounts of wetlands in that area. Up in the top middle, we've got some pretty large areas that are protected in the eastern part of Yuba County. Some of that's near Beale Air Force Base, and they're trying to really protect the area around Beale to prevent any conflicting uses, and open space is a great way to do that. Down in the bottom center, we've got the Sundas River Preserve, over 60,000 acres that have been championed by Nature Conservancy, BLM, and many other partners to make sure that we protect some of the riparian Valley Oak forest that's down there and all the important waterways. And then we've got, of course, Desolation and Granite Chief Wilderness areas. Those count. They're up by Lake Tahoe. Lake Folsom counts, apparently, even though it's mostly water that goes up and down and depending, but they're counting that for 30 by 30. And then the bottom, the other big chunk that we've got protected is out by Howard Ranch, south of Rancho Seco, where there's a lot of rolling grasslands with vernal pools. So those are kind of some core areas that we've got protected and we're hoping to build on. And so I mentioned too that even though working lands are so important for providing open space, just yesterday I was out at a farm that we're looking to put an easement on this summer. And, it's just great to not be surrounded just by houses, but be out on the farmland and have the open space. And many of our farmers are very minded towards conservation practices. They're adding those in, and they have, waterways that are buffered and things like that. So we want to also protect our farm to fork and our food producing capacity. So we're encouraging many of the farms to get conservation easements on them that can allow for continued agriculture as well. So excited to keep working on those, and working lands are an important part, especially in some of the surrounding counties that really depend on the agricultural income. And the other thing that we've noticed is that regional parks often aren't counting in the 30 by 30, but that's one of the things that, just in my analysis, I haven't seen many new regional parks created that provide public access in the Sacramento region recently. There is one that I know of, Hidden Falls, up in Placer County, and it's just overrun with people all the time. You know, there's the parking lot's pretty much full, and there's a huge demand for people to get out and access our natural lands. And so I think the Bay Area has really got a great advantage in this, and that they've created regional park districts that are funded with very small incremental property tax measures that they use to create, you know, hundreds of thousands of acres of open space that then they can create trails. They also use it for grazing and have multiple uses on there. So that's something that our region is kind of missing out on. And so I wanted to kind of compare ourselves to some of the other large metropolitan areas in California. You know, how are they doing as far as reaching 30 by 30 goals? And so, of course, we always love to hate the Bay Area, but they've, you know, have a long history of focusing on conservation. They also have some amazing landscapes and a very hilly terrain, so they're not quite as prone to sprawl probably as we are. But they've already reached what they consider 30% protected, and they've now set a goal of 50 by 50. So they're going to try and protect half of all their land by 2050. And that was just kind of a recent policy that they undertook. And then LA County is also another area that I wanted to look at. And they're saying that they currently have 38% of their lands protected. Now, a caveat here is that I found out just last week, they're not using the same definition as 30 by 30. So I think if they had national forest lands in LA County, you know, they have Angeles National Forest, they're counting some of that towards their 38%. So if we looked at Sacramento region, we would actually be able and use that same metric. We would actually not be too far behind them. We have about 30% that is also owned by national forests and other types of public entities. So maybe we're not doing quite as bad as originally thought. So even though I'm still learning about this, you know, sometimes you change and evolve as you're going through your thinking process. So we still have a long way to go. And just a few other things, you know, SACOG, in addition to looking at what makes things livable and doing transportation, they commissioned this study that they had a presentation on last year. And a lot of what we talk about, and the reason that we're looking at all these sprawl developments outside of Sacramento urban core, is people are saying, oh, there's the housing shortage. But one of the things that we find is that our region has been very behind as far as the proportion of multifamily units that we're building versus single family. So we continue to build kind of a larger lot style of development. And the other thing that we're seeing as a result of that is that the rents here have gone up more proportionally than other places that the consultants use to compare the Sacramento region. So even though we continue to sprawl, we're just creating more single family housing that's not helping to address our housing crisis. And there's a lot of other reasons for that, so I'll just leave that there. And as we sprawl outward, we are consuming farmland at an alarming rate. So SACOG found in their crop study last year, and from 1988 to 2018, we actually consumed 273,000 acres of ag. You know, you can see on my slide there, I was like, well, how big is that? So 2 times the surface of Lake Tahoe, or if you took the entire city of Sacramento, that's how we've grown over the last 30 years. So we need to put the brakes on the sprawl development. And there's currently proposals that, if you're following with ECOS, hopefully, and with Sierra Club and some of the other environmental groups, and hopefully CNPS is bringing some of this up as well. Right now, Natomas is kind of a hot spot. We've got the urban service boundary that Sacramento County adopted in 1993 is threatened. They want to go outside of it. There's multiple projects approved, not approved yet, but proposed, and we're starting to work through the process that would break through that urban service boundary and impact some of the best farmland in the Sacramento County area and probably in the region as well. And that's very important, especially along the Sacramento River for Swainson's hawk in particular. This also violates the habitat conservation plan that they put in place. So we're fighting against that. You know, you can come to the Planning Commission next Thursday night if you want and speak out against annexation of the first industrial project there. But there's a lot of fighting still to happen on this, and we need some help. And then, you know, another thing that they're talking about doing is leapfrog developments out in south of Folsom and El Dorado Hills. That's some new proposals to build some senior housing out there in the middle of nowhere that would impact some of our rolling oak woodlands and open space in that area. So as opposed to these types of projects, we have a lot of vacant land around Sacramento that really should be filled in, and all of the climate modeling that SACOG has done is pushing them to do that. That's what their blueprint calls for. It doesn't include these other projects that are outside the urban service boundary. So hopefully we can hold their feet to the fire and make some progress on that. We do have some bright spots. Many of the areas around Sacramento County now have habitat conservation plans, which, thanks to the endangered species that we found, are overall plans that help to set aside land for these species in the areas where they're being impacted. So one of the newer ones is here in South Sacramento County. We're working quite a bit with them on trying to protect vernal pools and create new vernal pools, and protect a lot of valley grassland habitat types, as well as some farmland and other kinds of wetland areas. Placer County is making pretty good strides in their area as well. And even though West Roseville is really sprawling out pretty fast, they are making new preserves in Placer County pretty regularly. So it is good we have some habitat conservation plans at least. But those are all, again, just mitigation. So we're losing something, and then we're trying to offset it with just mitigation. We do have also some bright spots. There's different land trusts that work kind of in different zones in our region. And almost all of us got a sustainable agricultural land conservation grant that allows us to work on building up new projects. And we got those grants about 2 years ago. And so we've been working for a couple of years developing projects. And now with Prop 4 money from the climate bond available, we're starting to get grant applications in and hoping to protect more land with grants. Have these property tax measures that the Bay Area does. We're really reliant on grants and often landowner donations to actually make a land transaction happen. So it's really, you know, our land trusts are not the powerhouses that they have over in the Bay Area, but for example, Placer Land Trust on Big Day of Giving, they always do very well, and usually in the conservation space, they're the number one donee for the whole Big Day of Giving campaign. So that's exciting. And then we do have another bright spot is that a lot of the land trusts have developed visions for their region as far as what conservation is important in those areas. And so it's nice to have that vision, at least, that's out there on a map, so we can see where the land trusts are focused on protecting lands. And then the other thing that's happened is that once I found out about that livability poll and how important natural areas are to people in the region, we started convening fairly regularly. And now we have created a chapter of the Power in Nature Collaborative. Again, that's a statewide group, but now we have a Sacramento Valley group, and we meet every couple months, and all of the land trusts are involved in that, as well as, the ECOS 2020 group. There's generally folks from CNPS that join that as well. And I've got about 110 people on my list right now for participants in that meeting. So that's something that it's open to the public too. If anybody here would like to join into that effort, I'll send the sign-in sheet around later. And I'll put my email up at the end too, if you want to email me if you're watching online. So we're starting to make some progress. And as part of that initiative with the Power in Nature group, we've got kind of 3 goals that we've put forward. The first one is to try and create a regional funding source that we can use to match the state and federal goals that are grants that are out there. So we identified, unfortunately, a federal source first that we're all working on coordinating and trying to access. It's called the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. And we're not sure if that's going to happen or not. So without that, I think we need to look at other things. In Sacramento County, there's been talks about extending Measure A, which is the transportation funding measure. There was an open space element in that last time, but maybe if we could get a slice of that funding source, that would be great. And then, other initiatives that are underway is that there's a group in the city of Sacramento also looking at a parks initiative, kind of like a parcel tax that would help fund parks. And as part of that, it could help fund the natural areas in the city. That's probably not going to get us a whole lot of progress on protecting large open space areas, but it's something, and we need some kind of a regional funding source that we're going to be able to access to match these things. The second thing we wanted to do is that SACOG does a blueprint every few years, which is their map that shows where there's expected to be development. And what we'd like to do is create a that can go with the blueprint, and the green print would identify where the priority natural areas are that we're going to be focusing on trying to protect. And then we can try and steer that development away from them and try and also steer resources towards protecting those priority areas. So the green print will most likely have rankings as to what areas are most important. And so that's something that we've just started working on. We've got some mapping going for it. We've got the beginnings of a framework, but we've got a lot of work to do. And that's another thing that we could use some help on if anybody wants to volunteer. And the third thing that we're working on is trying to raise the profile of the natural areas and encourage their protection as a regional group. There's a few things like Marshall up in El Dorado County. He's a podcast, so he's starting to talk about many of the natural areas. Very interesting if you have a chance, called All Land is Beautiful. And having more maps and information available, and then also going out and doing presentations like this in public places is something that's going to help spread the word about this initiative. We did find a new opportunity that we've just kind of latched onto as well, in that there's been a couple state laws passed recently that require local jurisdictions to update their general plans and open up their open space elements to make sure that they're providing for equitable access and habitat connectivity. And a lot of the local general plans are pretty old. So one of the things our group has taken on is we're having folks contact each jurisdiction to find out, there's these new laws that are in place. What are you doing to address the laws? Are you going to update your general plan? Are you in the process of a general plan update, or what is your plan for that? And we're working on a green print. Can we help you out? And we make sure that your plan is going to match up with all the jurisdictions around you so that we have more of a comprehensive connectivity analysis. So we've just started working on that recently. We're actually getting pretty good feedback from most of the jurisdictions. They're open to having some assistance with that. Free assistance is always welcome. So we're excited to work on that. And there's, like I said, there's opportunities to get involved in this process. And then with this green print document in particular, we've basically created some guiding principles, which are to keep the open spaces open and working lands working. That's going to be a lot of where our mapping and prioritization happens. Protecting clean air and clean water. We talked about those ecosystem services and nature-based solutions. How can we implement more of those into the actions that we're taking in the region? Providing green spaces in urban places. And so we talk about nearby nature sometimes, like it's great to have the preserves out there on the edge of the city, but it's also wonderful when people have access to natural elements nearby. And I know that CNPS is real leaders on that with the Homegrown National Park City and initiatives like that, where you're creating gardens and even on private property, where people can learn about and see native plants and how beautiful they are and get that connection with nature. So that's one of our emphases. And then the last one's to make the outdoors accessible for all. So having better access to these natural areas is our final focus. So right now we're starting drafting that and just setting priorities. And if we have time, we'll come back to that too at the end, because I'm curious about if there's feedback on how do you think we should handle this. So I'll come back to that though, assuming we have time. And then I wanted to just shift gears. So that's kind of like the big open space element, but I wanted to make sure that the group's also aware of some of the, urban efforts that are underway. Because I'm starting to join some local groups that are doing projects that I think we could also integrate native plants into. And part of the idea is that behind that is trying to green the city. We always think about nature, it's kind of sequestered out there on the outside, but changing the way we think about nature can be very effective, because the cities are actually the most biodiverse place. We don't have all natives here. Certainly we have all kinds of different landscape plants. We have different types of microhabitats depending on how much water you're putting out on different parts of your yard. You've got different types of little habitats even there. And so our vision for a city is that we try and integrate some of these nature-based solutions: green roofs, green walls, more diverse habitats in our yards, adding green spaces to many of the multifamily housing projects that are going in, taking our streets, which are have way too much asphalt on them, and turning them into places where we can get out and recreate and enjoy the streets more, with less of that asphalt and more spaces to plant, grow food, and grow native plants. And so just thinking about the kind of city that we could create. Leslie mentioned this initiative I have called National Park City, Sacramento, and that's what that's all about. Although that's kind of on the shelf because I'm working on these two things with the big open space. And then what I'm focused on more right now is there's a new group called Rewild Sacramento. And the idea is to try and get more wildlife and more wild diversity in our city to make it more interesting. So rewilding's a new initiative kind of all over the world. And I think here in Sacramento, we have some great building blocks that can help us work towards this, not just in our yards, but there's neglected public places all over the place. And I have one story for me. One of my gardeners, or one of the guys that helps out, Paul, is actually here in the audience. So we have a little lot in our neighborhood. I'm on 2nd Avenue in Curtis Park. And I met these gardeners in Oak Park that were just gardening on a vacant lot. And they said, we have this guy who he's going to build on this lot eventually, but in the meantime, he's looking for someone to start a garden on it. And it's on 2nd Avenue. And I said, I live on 2nd Avenue. I guess God means for me to just start a project there. So that's how it started. I flyered the neighborhood a little bit. And now we have something called Gateway Garden. It's on the corner of 26th and 2nd Avenue. And it's been really fun. We have about 5 to 6 gardeners that come out regularly. And we've got a border that's mostly made up of flowers, a lot of native plants. You can see down on the bottom right there is a photo I took just a few weeks ago when the Phacelia was just going crazy and the poppies were out. I think it was cold though, so the poppies were still closed at that point. But up in the top left is how it all started. It was just a vacant lot with a bunch of weeds. And so now we've been able to grow a lot of different food products on there. It grows all the tomatoes I need. So I really love that spot. And so that's the idea, is to try and find a whole network of people that will work on these types of projects and want to do things in their neighborhood. So Rewild Sacramento is a new group. It just started out of Strong Sacktown, which is a community group that has a lot of young people and a lot of really great energy behind it. I'd really encourage everybody to look them up on Instagram and other places. They're an incredible group, and they've got initiatives for housing, safe walking, and Rewild grew out of that. So far, Rewild has mostly focused on tree plantings. So they were doing tree plantings almost every Saturday at the beginning of the year. And now they're looking at doing some additional projects similar to, I think they're looking at doing one in Sutter's Landing Park, where we put in some native grasses and native plants, very similar to the grassland garden that was worked on in Thomas at the Ninos Parkway. And I know that one's been a lot of work, and I know these grassland projects take a lot of work and a lot of weeding. But I think if we can get enough people involved and excited about it and come out and do the regular weeding and maintaining the plants, that we can be successful there. So look for one at Sutter's Landing Park coming hopefully in the next year. I know we're working on a grant for that right now through the city's utility department. And then also I have an idea. There's a new trail that opened on from Land Park that goes all the way down to Freeport. It's called the Del Rio Trail, and it wasn't very well maintained. I mean, it wasn't mowed or anything for quite a while. So I noticed there was a lot of little oak trees that were popping up in the Del Rio Trail. So my idea, and I met with City Parks a couple of weeks ago, is to try and, first of all, protect the baby oak trees that are starting, that are in the good places, protect them from mowing and from the city's management practices, so that they can become full oak trees and fill in that area. It's already pretty well treed, so that's good. But then I think there's also a lot of nodes there that we can add mulched areas and hopefully add a lot of native plants, pollinator gardens, and using fairly low maintenance activities for that. So star thistle has to be pulled too. There's quite a bit of work, and it's a huge area, but I'm going to try and rally some people that live along there. There's a Friends of Del Rio Trail group that's formed, and try and see what we can do there. So if that's something that's of interest to you, sign up with Rewild Sacramento, get plugged in. And if you have a project nearby that you'd like to lead and need some support on, I think we'd like to get involved with that. The other, I think there's a need for this all over the place. Fulton El Camino Parks District called me a couple days ago, just in my Sac Valley Conservancy role, and said, hey, we have Creekside Nature Area, which is on Chicken Ranch Slough, out there off of, I think, Howe and Cottage. And she said, we could really use some help maintaining that area. We mow it sometimes, but I think there's more we could be doing. So there's probably opportunities all over the city and all over the county for working on these types of projects. And if we can all unite under a banner like Rewild Sacramento, or if CNPS can lead that, I don't know. We just all need to work together on these types of things and communicate. So excited to work on that. And then the last thing that's happening that's also urban focused is that ECOS has had a campaign for a couple of years called Natural Areas Program, trying to get the city to adopt a natural areas program. they did a parks planning process and did a parks master plan for 2040 that they adopted last year. And they did include a few elements of what we were trying to get in that, but they're really stretched thin for funding. And I think the only way we're going to really make progress with the city is by starting some of these initiatives like at the Del Rio Trail and at Sutter's Landing, and showing the city how volunteer and citizen action can help to take some of that load off of the city maintenance, because they're just mowing the parks where there's grass all the time. And we need to get a changeover where they're replacing some of that turf with native plant gardens and things that are less maintenance. So if that's something you're interested in, we've got there's folks at Del Paso Regional Park that are definitely working away and want to do more out there. And if we can start in the Del Rio Trail, I've mapped the areas that the city has identified as quote open space areas, and there's a lot of space out there within the city limits. There's about 1,500 acres total. A lot of it's in waterways like Steelhead Creek and Arcade Creek that, those flood up and down, and there's also a lot of encampments in those areas. So we have to deal with those issues, but there's tons of opportunities to get involved with hands on the ground projects to try out and see if we can't get more native plant areas. So I think that's most of my presentation. Let me see if I can open up to questions first. And then if we have a few minutes, I'd love to go back and just ask the crowd what they think as far as prioritization on maybe how we should approach protecting large areas of our region. So any questions for me? Yes.
You used the term habitat connectivity at one point in your presentation. And one way to not have that is to have a highway that's through a big swath of land. So you have two smaller swaths. I think I heard down in Los Angeles, they're making a wild bridge for wildlife to cross and to increase that connectivity.
Yeah.
Have you heard about Caltrans having plans anywhere else? I mean, it seems like Interstate 5 through, this or south of the Bell area, it might make good sense for that.
Yeah.
Those type of infrastructure?
It seems I have not heard of any proposals for wildlife crossings up here in our region. Yeah, that one got a lot of publicity because it was mountain lions, I think, primarily. And I don't know if maybe in, say, El Dorado County and Placer County, where the freeways go up and down a bit, and there's more culverts and undercrossings where they don't have as large a barrier is the reason. But we haven't finished our mapping yet to identify those connectivity corridors that would be hindered by the freeways. But yeah, I haven't heard of any overpasses yet. Other than Davis, there's the Frog Highway, right? Where they create an underpass. Yeah, and underpasses work fine for frogs. I doubt a mountain lion could use that though.
Design in part of Region Cordova that we're still arguing with developers about because they agreed to it. Now they're trying to renege.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know if everybody heard that, but there's some underpasses in Rancho Cordova where we might be seeing some wildlife undercrossings. Yeah. I think, a huge project that's a roadway expansion is that Southeast Connector project, which is running along Grant Line Road, White Rock. And I think that the area that they expanded on White Rock Road at least has one place where my understanding is they're putting the bike trail through there, and there's also Alder Creek runs under there. So that could be a good wildlife access corridor because they have about 1,000 acres of oak woodlands and open space on the north side of that highway. And hopefully that's enough space for the animals to get through there. I'm not sure if they've designated any other openings along that route. Allie?
I think shared this already and I just didn't hold it. You said that the 30 by 30 doesn't include the national forest, is that right?
Right. Generally, no, except unless it's an area that has management restrictions where it's not going to be logged. So like a wilderness area, for example. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that follow-up question that you mentioned that some of the regional parks are also not under 30 by 30. Why is that? Is that because they get kind of so much use or?
I think a lot of it's like if you go to Gibson Ranch, a lot of it's like soccer fields, or a lot of our regional parks are, not managed for biodiversity. They're purely recreational spaces, and that's what we see mostly in the city too. Is what their priority is. Oh, we're going to create more neighborhood parks that are active recreation, as opposed to providing more open space, like larger areas that are natural, where people can have trails. And I think there's a lot of demand for the natural areas that people can move through a natural type of area. There's a lot of demand for that, but the city's just looking to provide recreation spaces like sports fields. So yeah. Yes.
You made a good point about the overuse of like Hidden Falls might remove it from the conserved land category. But if it provides connectivity between two adjacent areas, wouldn't that be of value and enable it to contribute, like Gibson Ranch
Yeah.
also provides some connectivity?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think my point there is that, 30 by 30, to count for that, it's very restrictive. And I think we don't want to only protect lands that qualify for 30 by 30. We've got a growing population, and we need outlets and places for the regional recreation. So we need to be creating more places like Hidden Falls in particular, where there's trails and there's large open space areas. And we just don't have a mechanism for that, because the cities and counties aren't trying to add to their land portfolio. They're all under pressure with their maintenance requirements and are generally not looking to add land to their portfolios. So we've kind of got to break past that and figure out how we can add new regional parks and how we're going to fund those. Yeah. Any other questions? Paul?
You mentioned Sutter's Landing, and I've been involved in that since it started out there. What, the big thing is just not enough volunteers. What were you guys considering or thinking of doing or adding to that?
I understand that we're looking to create an area where there's more plantings. I know there was a small one created at the base of the trail recently.
Last year we took out about half a mile of those artificials and planted all ladies all along there.
Yeah, half a mile.
Well, quarter mile, third mile.
Okay.
That's a lot.
I just-
Months taking weeds out.
Oh yeah.
Massive piles of gold garbage.
Yeah. I talked to Alex, who was the one who came up with the idea. I think he was looking almost towards the fence line that's on the west side of the park at doing something down there. I'm not sure how well it's vetted or how. Yeah.
Anybody wants to volunteer, we volunteers out there.
Yeah. Monthly work days.
Monthly work days, you can go to Friends of Sutter's Landing website, sign up.
Okay.
Right in the city, a lot of native plants down there.
Yeah. So I think one of our big needs is like, we need a place where all these volunteer events are together, right? So they're coordinated. Yeah. How's that going to happen? I'm not sure. I try.
Friends of Sutter's Landing.
Yeah.
Fossil.
Friends of Sutter's Landing. Well, let me just go back to this then too. And I'm just curious because, we think about our green print and we want to try and prioritize. If we're going to protect certain areas, we only have so much funding that we can go after with grants in a certain year. So I'm kind of seeing two main categories for what we might try and focus on. One of them is what's going to be the most valuable. There's things like biodiversity richness, lots of different species in a spot. There's places that have very rare plants and rare animals. There's unique habitats like maybe Pine Hill Preserve or vernal pools certainly qualify for that. And then there's also places where as climate changes and habitats are no longer suitable for some animals and plants, they need to move to other areas. Are we going to try and protect those in advance so they can move there?
So I,
Yeah.
if I may, I think that in this rapidly expanding urbanization going on in this greater Sacramento area, we really, besides identifying those hot spots that are the cherries on top, we really need to start looking at those corridors and grabbing those corridors, because we will lose those. And so, I mean, the really, really good open space areas, it's gonna take a while before somebody has the nerve to try and develop them. But those corridors between those areas are just right for people to come in and, connect two cities together. It's happened all over the Sacramento region. And so I think it's really important to identify and go after the corridor areas so that we have connectivity in the long run.
Okay. Yeah. I think so. I was talking about like that was my first one, is like what's most valuable, but also what's most threatened. We have urban sprawl and encroachment, fragmentation, aggregate. What does that say? Aggregate mining, large scale solar projects, and climate change. So, that's a threat as those connectivity areas get cut off, right?
It's the eastern part of Sacramento County.
Build inside of them.
I mean, we big little holes in there, the whole bit.
Oh yeah.
The topography, but those areas are ripe for some kind of development.
Yeah.
As opposed to going out into green spaces.
Right. Yeah. Well, I've been watching the West Jackson Highway specific plan project has been working its way through. You don't like that one? It does have a lot of open space included in there, including some urban farms that they have in there.
I'm sorry, just like Cordova Hill should never have been approved. I mean, it shouldn't have been part of the Sacramento County General Plan.
Oh, because that's like it's all old mining pits, right? West Jackson Highway.
Yeah.
That's.
You're talking about, okay, you may be talking about a different project.
Yeah,
Jackson Township.
Oh yeah, not Jackson Township. This is to the west of that. It's all Tykert and granite owned mining pits. Yeah. So there's a plan currently moving through, and it has a lot of development, but it also provides a lot of open space, because the low areas, they build up some areas, but then the low areas they're mostly keeping as wetlands and urban farms and things like that. Yeah. It's all right. Anybody else have comments or thoughts? Like, how would we prioritize things? What would you put first? Yeah.
Comment is, what I'm gonna say is it's gonna take money and I don't know how all that would work. But the Sacramento Zoo has, routes to go up to Elk Grove, but that petered out now. We have Plant Park, which is a small park. I envision if someone could come up with funding and everything, they have 1,000 acres plus park like Golden Gate Park, where you have the big old zoo, and you have your parks. You can have some natural areas in there, and what sort of thing. And out on Grant Line, out that direction, or Prairie City.
Yeah, on Jackson Highway, that a mining pit might be a great place for a zoo.
Yeah.
Especially some of the animals couldn't climb their way out. As long as it doesn't flood, though. But those are actually pretty safe from flooding generally. Although I know the Granite Regional Park pit, a lot of that is actually flooded up with water when I went out to look at it a couple of years ago.
It might be used as a stormwater pond.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ask a question. So that people online can hear,
Or if I should repeat it. Okay. All right. Anybody else have thoughts on priorities? All right, well, we can wrap it up then.
Thank you, Steve.
I guess I went over half an hour, so. I'll go back to my email. So yeah, feel free to email me if you have any questions or want to get involved and you're online. I do have a sign-in sheet if you want to add your name and get involved in either the green print, the regional open space effort, or if you want to get involved in Rewild Sacramento, we can add you to that list too. Yeah.
And I don't know how about all of it's still there, but I saw some people were in the chat.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, I think people couldn't hear folks talking. It's
Thank you.
yes, thank you for having me.